The year is 1280. Somewhere on the windswept steppes of the Mongol Empire, beneath a sky so vast it swallows the horizon, a circle has formed. Warriors on horseback, their breath visible in the frozen air, their armor glinting under the pale winter sun. In the center, two figures prepare for combat. One is a seasoned warrior, a champion from a distant khanate, his chest broad, his reputation built on the bones of defeated enemies. The other is a woman. Her name is Khutulun. She is the daughter of Kaidu, one of the most powerful Khans in the Mongol world, and she has never lost a fight. Not once. Not ever. The men around her whisper, some in admiration, others in disbelief, a few in barely concealed rage. Because Khutulun has made a promise, a challenge that echoes across the empire like thunder, any man who wishes to marry her must first defeat her in wrestling. If he wins, he takes her hand. If he loses, he forfeits 100 horses. By now, she owns more than 10,000. The champion charges. Khutulun moves like wind through grass, fluid, precise, untouchable. Within seconds, he is on his back, gasping for air, humiliated. The crowd erupts. Some cheer. Others turn away in disgust. Because in the Mongol Empire, where power is everything and gender is supposed to dictate destiny, Khutulun is an anomaly, a paradox, a woman who should not exist. She is the greatest warrior of her generation, undefeated in combat, respected by her father, feared by her enemies, and adored by her people. She should have been empress. She should have ruled an empire that stretched from China to the edges of Europe. But she was denied. Not by weakness. Not by failure. But by something far more insidious, the politics of men who could not stomach the idea of a woman on the throne. This is the story of Khutulun, the warrior princess who broke every rule, defeated every challenger, and was still erased from the history she helped shape. How does a woman become a legend and still be forgotten? How does power become a prison when you are born into the wrong body? And what does it say about history that the greatest fighter of her age was denied her birthright not because she wasn't strong enough, but because she was never supposed to be? The Mongol Empire in the 13th century was the largest contiguous land empire in human history, a juggernaut of conquest and blood that reshaped the world. Founded by Genghis Khan in 1206, it was built on principles of meritocracy, brutality, and pragmatism. If you could fight, if you could lead, if you could conquer, you rose. Gender, in theory, mattered less than in other civilizations. Mongol women could own property, influence politics, divorce their husbands, and even ride into battle. The great Khans consulted their wives and mothers on matters of state. Torajin Khatun ruled as regent for 5 years. Sorgatani Beki was one of the most politically astute figures in the empire, maneuvering her sons onto thrones. But theory and practice are not the same thing. While Mongol women enjoyed more freedom than their counterparts in Europe, China, or the Islamic world, ultimate political authority remained a male domain. Women could advise, influence, and regent, but they could not rule in their own right. Not officially. Not without challenge. And certainly not without resistance. By the time Khutulun was born, around 1260, the empire had fractured into competing khanates, each ruled by descendants of Genghis Khan, each vying for supremacy. The unity forged by the Great Khan had splintered into 4 major divisions: the Yuan dynasty in China under Kublai Khan, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Golden Horde in Russia. Her father, Kaidu, controlled a vast territory in Central Asia, a realm that stood in defiant opposition to Kublai Khan, who had claimed the title of Great Khan and established the Yuan dynasty in China. Kaidu rejected Kublai's authority, viewing him as too influenced by Chinese culture, too soft, too far removed from the old Mongol ways of the steppes. He saw Kublai's adoption of Chinese administrative systems, Confucian rituals, and settled urban life as a betrayal of the nomadic warrior culture that had built the empire. For Kaidu, the soul of the Mongol Empire was on the steppes, not in the palaces of Beijing. This was a world of constant war, shifting alliances, and brutal realpolitik. A world where strength was currency and weakness was death. A world where reputation could be won with a single victory and lost with a single defeat. Into this world, Khutulun was born. She was one of Kaidu's many children. Some sources say he had as many as 14 sons and an unknown number of daughters, but from the beginning, she was different. While her brothers trained in archery and horsemanship, she trained harder. While they wrestled, she wrestled better. Mongol wrestling, known as bok, was not a game. It was a test of strength, strategy, and endurance, a ritual that determined status and honor among warriors. Matches could last hours, a grueling contest of grip, balance, and willpower. Victory brought prestige. Defeat brought shame. Khutulun mastered it. Historical accounts, including those of the Venetian explorer Marco Polo, who traveled through the Mongol Empire during her lifetime, describe her as extraordinarily strong, skilled in combat, and utterly fearless. Polo wrote that she would ride into the thick of battle, snatch an enemy warrior from his horse as if he were a feather, and deliver him to her father like a trophy. He described her as having the strength of a giant, capable of feats that seemed superhuman. She was, by all accounts, a force of nature, a woman who embodied the warrior ethos of the Mongols more completely than most men ever could. But her greatest arena was not the battlefield. It was the wrestling circle. Kaidu, recognizing his daughter's prowess and perhaps understanding the impossible position she occupied, allowed her to issue her challenge. Any suitor who wished to marry her must first defeat her in combat. The stakes were clear. If the suitor won, he would gain her hand in marriage, a union that would tie him to one of the most powerful families in the Mongol world. If he lost, he would forfeit 100 horses, a significant wealth in a culture where horses were the measure of prosperity and power. It was a brilliant move, a way to honor her strength while navigating the deeply patriarchal expectations of marriage and succession. It turned courtship into competition, romance into warfare, and marriage into a prize that had to be earned through merit, not negotiation. Men came from across the empire, confident, arrogant, certain that no woman could truly be as formidable as the stories claimed. They brought their 100 horses, their pride, their assumptions. They came from neighboring khanates, from rival clans, from distant territories hoping to forge alliances through marriage. Some were seasoned warriors with decades of experience. Others were young champions eager to prove themselves. All of them believed, deep in their bones, that they would win. Because how could they not? She was a woman. And one by one, Khutulun destroyed them. She did not just win. She dominated. She humiliated. She turned the institution of marriage into a public spectacle of female supremacy, and with every victory, her legend grew. The horses piled up. 10,000. More. Khutulun became rich, powerful, and untouchable. Marco Polo recounted one particular instance where a suitor, supremely confident, wagered 1,000 horses instead of the customary 100, so certain was he of victory. Kaidu, it is said, urged his daughter to let this one win, to finally accept a husband, perhaps because he was a suitable match politically. Khutulun refused. She faced him in the circle and defeated him as she had defeated all the others. The 1,000 horses became hers. Some men, it is said, deliberately lost because they were too terrified of what defeating her might mean, of the political and social ramifications of besting the daughter of Kaidu. To defeat her might mean earning the enmity of one of the most powerful khans in Central Asia. To marry her might mean living in the shadow of a woman stronger than you, a humiliation some men could not bear. Others genuinely tried and failed, their strength insufficient, their technique lacking, their confidence shattered against the reality of her skill. And with each defeat, the legend grew larger. Khutulun became more than a woman. She became a symbol, a challenge to every assumption about gender and power, a living refutation of the idea that strength was inherently male. But power, especially for a woman, is never without consequence. Kaidu adored his daughter. He consulted her on military strategy, brought her to council meetings, and openly declared that she was worth more than all of his sons combined. Historical chronicles note that he took her counsel seriously, that she accompanied him on campaigns, that she was present at critical decisions. As he aged, as the wars with Kublai Khan dragged on for decades, as his body began to fail under the weight of constant conflict, a question loomed larger and larger: who would succeed him? Tradition dictated it should be a son. The Mongol legal code, the Yasa established by Genghis Khan, had provisions for succession, but they were often contested, interpreted, and bent according to political expediency. In theory, the most capable should lead. In practice, capability was filtered through gender, through alliances, through the machinations of advisors and generals who had their own interests to protect. Logic, merit, and capability pointed to Khutulun. She had proven herself in every conceivable way. She was a warrior, a strategist, a leader respected by the troops. She had fought in battles, negotiated with allies, and demonstrated the kind of ruthless pragmatism that the Mongol world valued. She was, by every measure that mattered in Mongol culture, the rightful heir. Kaidu knew it. And according to some sources, including the Persian historian Rashid al-Din, he wanted it. He recognized that his sons, while competent, did not possess the exceptional qualities that Khutulun embodied. But wanting and achieving are not the same. The Khan's advisors, his generals, his male relatives, they balked. A woman as Khan? Impossible. Unthinkable. It would destabilize alliances, invite rebellion, fracture the already fragile coalition Kaidu had built against Kublai Khan. Whispers turned to protests. Protests turned to threats. The same men who had cheered Khutulun's victories in the wrestling circle, who had benefited from her counsel in war, who had watched her ride into battle and emerge victorious, now turned against her. Not because she was unworthy, but because she was a woman. The political reality was complex and vicious. Kaidu's realm was held together by a delicate web of alliances, marriages, and mutual interest in resisting Kublai Khan's dominance. To name Khutulun as successor would mean asking every subordinate Khan, every allied tribe, every ambitious general to accept female authority. In a world where power was constantly contested, where any sign of weakness could trigger rebellion, this was seen as an unacceptable risk. The advisors argued that naming her would invite civil war, that rival factions would refuse to recognize her, that the enemies of Kaidu would exploit the perceived weakness. They argued that the Mongol world, for all its relative progressivism, was not ready. That external enemies would see a female Khan as an opportunity. That tradition, even if flexible, had limits. And that limit was gender. The historical record becomes murky here, shrouded in the fog of time and the bias of those who recorded it. What is clear is that Khutulun was passed over. When Kaidu died in 1301, after decades of warfare and political maneuvering, the throne did not go to her. It went to one of her brothers, Orus, a man whose name history barely remembers, whose accomplishments pale in comparison, whose reign was unremarkable and short-lived. Some sources suggest Khutulun supported this decision, that she stepped aside to prevent civil war, sacrificing her ambition for the stability of her father's legacy and the unity of his realm. This would be consistent with Mongol values of loyalty and pragmatism. Others hint at deeper betrayals, at political maneuvering and backroom deals that ensured she would never rule, at threats and ultimatums delivered in private, at a succession engineered to exclude her despite her qualifications. What is undeniable is the injustice of it. A woman who had never lost a fight, who had commanded armies, who had embodied the Mongol ideal of strength and cunning, was denied the one victory that mattered most. Not because she failed, but because the world was not ready for her. And then, even more cruelly, history forgot her. While Genghis Khan's name thundered through the centuries, while Kublai Khan's empire was chronicled in exhaustive detail by Chinese historians, while the campaigns of Ogidi and Monk were preserved in multiple sources, Khutulun faded. The chronicles that mentioned her were written by outsiders, by men like Marco Polo who viewed her as an exotic curiosity, a fascinating anomaly rather than a legitimate political and military force. In his accounts, she is remarkable but strange, a woman who wrestles, a novelty worth mentioning but not worth centering. In Mongol records, she is a footnote, if she appears at all. The official histories, compiled by later dynasties and empires with their own agendas, had little interest in preserving the story of a woman who challenged the gender order. The empire that prided itself on meritocracy, that claimed to honor strength above all, erased the memory of its greatest female warrior. Why? Because her existence was inconvenient. Because it challenged the narrative that power was a male domain. Because acknowledging her would mean acknowledging that a woman could have ruled an empire, and that she was deliberately denied. So the story was buried, fragmented, scattered across obscure texts and conflicting accounts, left to gather dust in the margins of history. But legends do not die easily. In Mongolia, in Central Asia, in the regions that once formed Kaida's realm, Khutulun's name still whispers through folklore. She is remembered in songs, in stories passed down through generations, in the cultural memory of a people who know that the official record is incomplete. She appears in oral traditions as a symbol of strength, a heroine who could not be defeated, a daughter who honored her father. Modern historians, piecing together fragments from Persian, Chinese, European, and Mongolian sources, have begun to reconstruct her life, to honor her legacy, to ask the questions that should have been asked centuries ago. What would the Mongol Empire have looked like under her rule? How would history have changed if merit, not gender, had determined succession? Would Kaidu's coalition have survived longer? Would the resistance to Kublai Khan have been more effective? And how many other Khutuluns have been lost, their stories erased because they threatened the fragile egos of men who could not bear to be surpassed? Khutulun married eventually, though the details are unclear and contradictory. Some sources say she chose a man of her own accord, someone who respected her, who did not require her defeat to claim her, a companion rather than a conqueror. The man's name is sometimes given as Ghazan, though this is disputed. Others suggest political pressure forced her hand, that marriage was a way to neutralize her, to transform a warrior into a wife, to domesticate the untamable. Marriage, in this reading, was a tool of control, a way to remove her from the political equation without outright exile or execution. She continued to fight, continued to ride beside her chosen Khan, but the throne that should have been hers remained forever out of reach. She lived in a world that celebrated her strength but refused to grant her the authority that strength should have commanded. She was allowed to be extraordinary, but only within limits. She could defeat men, but she could not rule them. She could win every battle except the one that mattered most. The tragedy of Khutulun is not just personal. It is emblematic of a larger, more insidious pattern. Throughout history, women who have risen to power, who have demonstrated exceptional ability, have been met with the same resistance. They are celebrated as anomalies, as exceptions, as remarkable because they are rare, but the systems that kept them rare are never dismantled. Khutulun's story was not erased by accident. It was erased by design, by a historical apparatus that has always been more comfortable with the myth of male supremacy than the reality of female excellence. She was too powerful to ignore in her lifetime, but easy enough to forget once she was gone. The historians who came after had no interest in centering a woman who challenged their worldview. The political structures that succeeded Kaidu's realm had no incentive to preserve the memory of a female heir who was denied. And so she faded, her name surviving only in fragments, her story incomplete, her legacy stolen. Imagine the wrestling circle one last time. Imagine Khutulun standing in the center, undefeated, surrounded by the discarded pride of men who thought themselves superior. Imagine the horses, thousands of them, a monument to her dominance, a tangible measure of male arrogance shattered. Imagine her father watching, pride and sorrow mingling in his eyes, knowing his daughter is his greatest legacy and knowing the world will never let her claim it. Imagine the advisors in the shadows, already planning how to write her out of the story, how to ensure that future generations remember the Khans, the conquerors, the empire, but not the woman who embodied all of it better than any man. Imagine the injustice of it, the weight of potential unfulfilled, of a throne denied, of a legacy deliberately obscured. Imagine what she must have felt, standing in that circle, knowing she could defeat any opponent except the one that truly mattered, the prejudice of an entire system. This is not ancient history. This is a warning. Because the forces that denied Khutulun her throne are still at work today. The same structures that erased her from the record continue to marginalize, diminish, and silence. The same discomfort with female power, the same insistence that excellence must conform to gender expectations, the same willingness to rewrite history to protect fragile narratives. Khutulun's story is not just about the past. It is about every woman who has been told she is too much, too strong, too ambitious. It is about every leader who was denied not for lack of ability but for lack of the right body. It is about the thousand invisible ways history is shaped not by truth, but by those who hold the pen. It is about the continuing struggle to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged as fully human and fully capable. The wrestling matches Khutulun won were not just physical contests. They were symbolic battles against an entire worldview. Every man she defeated was a refutation of the idea that women were naturally weaker, naturally unsuited for power, naturally destined for subordination. Every 100 horses she claimed was evidence that merit could transcend gender. And every time she was denied the throne, every time her accomplishments were minimized, every time her story was erased, it was a reassertion of the old order, a desperate attempt to maintain a hierarchy that her very existence threatened. The tragedy is that she won the battles but lost the war. She proved she was the strongest, the most capable, the most worthy. And it didn't matter. Because the game was rigged from the beginning. Khutulun deserved the throne. She earned it in blood, in sweat, in 10,000 victories. She was denied it by politics, by prejudice, by the pathetic fragility of men who could not bear to bow to someone greater. And then, in the final insult, she was erased. Her name should be spoken in the same breath as Genghis Khan, as Alexander, as any of the great conquerors. Instead, it is a whisper, a fragment, a story that survived not because it was honored, but because it was too extraordinary to completely destroy. We owe her more than memory. We owe her recognition. We owe her the acknowledgement that she was robbed, that history failed her, and that the empire she helped build would rather forget her than confront the uncomfortable truth of her greatness. So here is the question we must ask ourselves: how many more Khutuluns are buried in the unmarked graves of history? How many women ruled in all but name, fought in all but record, shaped the world in all but acknowledgement? And what does it say about us that we are still uncovering these stories, still fighting to restore the names that should never have been erased? Khutulun was undefeated. History tried to defeat her anyway. But stories, like warriors, have a way of surviving. And this one, finally, is being told. The horses she won still echo through time, a reminder that strength cannot be erased, even when it is inconvenient. The wrestling circle still stands in our imagination, a space where merit was supposed to triumph, where it did triumph, and where that triumph was still not enough. Her legacy is not just what she accomplished. It is what she was denied. And in that denial, we see the true cost of a history written by those too afraid to acknowledge greatness when it comes in the wrong form. If this story moved you, if it made you angry, if it made you question what else has been hidden from the pages we were taught, leave your thoughts below. Share the names of other warriors who were forgotten, other queens whose thrones were stolen, other stories that deserve to be dragged back into the light. Subscribe, because there are more of these legends waiting, more injustices waiting to be named, more truths that have been buried for far too long. This is not just history. This is reclamation. This is remembering. And it starts with refusing to let them be forgotten again.